What the hell are you doing to my son? William Harris stood frozen in the doorway, his heart slamming against his chest. Grace Abraham, the maid he'd hired 3 weeks ago, was sitting in the rocking chair, holding his 5-month-old baby, nursing him, breastfeeding his son. Grace's eyes flew open, her body went stiff. Carefully, she detached Adrian and pulled him close. "Mr. Harris, please, let me explain." "Explain?" William's voice cracked with rage. "You think you can just touch my child? Feed him like you have some right?" Grace stood slowly, her arms wrapped around the baby. He wasn't eating. The formula. He kept rejecting it. "He was dying, Mr. Harris. I'm a neonatal nurse. I still produce milk." He latched. He needed it. "I don't care what he needed." William stepped closer, his fists clenched. "You don't get to make that choice." Grace's voice grew firmer. "I did what any mother would do." "You're not his mother." Adrian started crying, louder now, reaching back toward Grace. William's jaw tightened. "Get out, you're done here." "No." He froze. "What did you say?" "I'm not leaving." Grace looked him straight in the eye. "Not until I know he's safe." "You crossed a line." "Your wife asked me to come here." The room went silent. William's face drained of color. "What?" "Rebecca was my cousin." Grace's voice didn't waver. "She made me promise, before she died, that I'd protect him, that I'd make sure he knew who he really was." William felt the ground shift beneath him. Rebecca, cousin, promise. Everything he'd buried for 5 months was rising to the surface. "You're lying." "I'm not." Grace shifted Adrian in her arms. She recorded a message. "Before labor, she knew something was wrong, and she made me swear I wouldn't let you erase him." William's hands started shaking. Grace walked toward the door and stopped. "I made your wife a promise, Mr. Harris, and I don't break promises to the dead." Then she was gone, and William stood alone in the nursery, staring at nothing, his mind spinning, his heart pounding, because deep down he knew she was telling the truth, and everything he'd been hiding was about to come out. Before we continue, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Because sometimes God sends people into our lives in the most unexpected ways, not to judge us, but to save what we're too afraid to face. William stood alone in the nursery, staring at the empty rocking chair. His hands were still shaking. Down the hall, he could hear Adrian crying, that weak, tired sound that had become normal. He walked to the crib and lifted his son, trying to hold him close, but Adrian squirmed, turned his face away, like William was a stranger. "It's okay," William whispered, his voice cracking. "Daddy's here." But the baby wouldn't settle. He kept fussing, twisting in William's arms, reaching toward the door, toward her, and something inside William broke. His son didn't want him. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. The door opened. Eleanor stood there, still in her gardening clothes, dirt on her hands. She'd heard everything. "I heard him laughing," she said quietly, "from the garden. I've been waiting 5 months to hear that sound." William didn't answer. Eleanor stepped closer, her eyes searching his face. What did that woman do? She crossed a line. What line? William turned away, still holding Adrian. The baby was crying harder now, his small body trembling. "She said," William's throat tightened, "she said she knew Rebecca." Eleanor froze. "What?" "She said Rebecca was her cousin, that Rebecca asked her to come here." The room went cold. Eleanor's voice dropped to a whisper. "William, what aren't you telling me about Rebecca?" Before he could answer, there was a soft knock at the door. Grace stood in the doorway. Her bag was over her shoulder, but she wasn't leaving yet. In her hand, she held her phone. "Before I go," she said quietly, "there's something you need to see." She looked at Eleanor, then at William. "Your wife recorded this, the day she went into labor." Grace's voice trembled. "Hours before she died." William felt his chest cave in. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. Grace stepped forward and placed the phone on the dresser. The screen was black, but William could see the time stamp, 5 months ago, the day Rebecca died. "She knew something was wrong," Grace whispered. She knew she might not make it, so she left you a message. Grace's finger hovered over the play button. She wanted you to know the truth. Then she pressed play, and Rebecca's face appeared on the screen, pale, exhausted, her hand resting on her swollen belly, and she began to speak. Rebecca's face filled the small screen. She looked tired, so tired. Her skin was pale, her eyes red from crying, but there was something else there too, determination. "William," she said softly, her voice weak. "If you're watching this, I'm gone." William's legs gave out. He sank into the chair, still holding Adrian. Eleanor moved closer, her hand covering her mouth. Rebecca took a shaky breath on the screen. "I need you to know some things I never had the courage to say while I was alive." Her hand rested on her belly, rubbing slow circles. "I love you. I've always loved you. But I've also been afraid of you." William's chest tightened. "Not afraid you'd hurt me," Rebecca continued, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Afraid of your silence. Afraid of the way you looked at me when I spoke my language. Afraid of how small you made me feel when I wanted to call my mother." Eleanor gasped softly. "I agreed to hide who I was because I was young, because I thought love meant sacrifice." Rebecca's voice cracked. "But every year it got harder. Every time I lied to your family, every time I pretended to be someone else, I lost a piece of myself." William couldn't breathe. "When I got pregnant, I thought things would change. I thought you'd finally tell the truth. But you didn't." Rebecca wiped her eyes. 2 months into this pregnancy, I tried to leave. Do you remember?" William's hands started trembling. "You begged me to stay. You promised you'd tell your father. You promised you'd introduce me to your family as I really am. Yoruba, Nigerian, African. You swore on our baby that things would be different." Rebecca looked directly into the camera, her eyes burning with something between grief and fury. "But you never did. And now I'm in this hospital bed, and the doctors keep using words like pre-eclampsia and high risk. And I'm scared, William, not of dying, of disappearing." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "If I don't survive this, I need you to promise me something. Don't erase our son the way you erased me." Adrian whimpered in William's arms. On the screen, Rebecca leaned closer, her face filling the frame. "His name is Oluwaseun. It means God has done this. It's the name I chose, the name I wrote down. Please don't take that from him." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I've asked my cousin Grace to watch over him, to make sure he knows where he comes from, to make sure he hears my voice, even if I'm not there to speak." Rebecca's hand trembled as she reached toward the camera. "I forgive you, William, but our son deserves better. He deserves to be whole." The screen went black. The room fell silent. William sat frozen, tears streaming down his face. Eleanor was crying too, her hand pressed against the wall to steady herself. Grace stood by the door, watching them both, and then Eleanor turned to her son, her voice shaking with something William had never heard before. Rage. "Tell me you didn't do what I think you did." Chapter 3. Eleanor's voice cut through the silence like glass. "Tell me you didn't erase her." William couldn't look at her. He sat there holding Adrian, his face wet with tears. "Mom, don't." Eleanor's hand was shaking. "Don't you dare make excuses." She turned to Grace. "How long have you known?" Grace's voice was steady but soft. "Rebecca called me 6 months ago. When she was 2 months pregnant, she was crying. She said she tried to leave, but William convinced her to stay." Eleanor closed her eyes. "She asked me to promise her something," Grace continued. "If anything happened to her, I had to find a way into this house. I had to make sure Adrian knew who his mother really was." William finally looked up, his voice breaking. "She cut ties with her family. She told you what you wanted to hear," Grace interrupted, her tone sharp now, "because you made her choose between you and everyone she loved." Eleanor turned back to her son, her eyes blazing. "What was she, William? What did you make her hide?" The question hung in the air. William's throat closed up. He couldn't say it, couldn't admit it out loud, but Grace said it for him. Rebecca was Nigerian, Yoruba. She was born in Lagos and raised in London. She had a family, a mother, brothers, sisters, people who loved her. Grace's voice cracked. People who begged her not to marry a man who was ashamed of her. Eleanor stumbled backward, gripping the edge of the dresser. You told me she was British." "She was British," William said desperately. "She grew up in London. She went to Cambridge. But she was Nigerian," Eleanor whispered, "and you hid it." William looked down at Adrian. The baby had stopped crying now, exhausted, his small chest rising and falling against William's. "Dad would have pulled his funding," William said, his voice barely audible. "The company would have collapsed. I had investors, contracts, everything on the line." "So you chose money." Eleanor's voice was hollow now, empty. "You chose your father's approval over your wife's identity." William didn't answer. Eleanor walked to the window, staring out at nothing. "Did her family come to the funeral?" Silence. "William, did they come?" "No." "Why not?" "Because," William's voice broke completely, "because they didn't know she was dead, not until weeks later." Eleanor spun around, her face twisted in horror. "You didn't tell them?" Grace stepped forward, pulling something from her pocket, a folded piece of paper. "That's not all he did," she said quietly. She handed the paper to Eleanor. It was a birth certificate. Eleanor's hands trembled as she read it. Her eyes moved across the page, then stopped, widened. "Adrian James Harris," she whispered. Then she looked at William, her voice barely a breath. "Where is Oluwaseun?" William's face crumpled, and Grace's voice came soft but cold. "He erased it. The day Rebecca died, while she was unconscious in the delivery room, he changed the baby's name, forged her signature on the documents." Eleanor dropped the paper. Her hand flew to her chest, and outside, gravel crunched in the driveway. A car door slammed. Grace's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, then at William. "Rebecca's family just landed in Seattle," she said. "They're on their way here." William stood up slowly, still holding Adrian. His legs felt weak. "How long have they known?" he asked. Grace looked at him, her expression unreadable. "About me being here? 3 weeks, about Rebecca being dead? 5 months? But they've been watching you longer than that." The words hit like stones. "Watching me?" "Rebecca's mother hired a lawyer 2 months after the funeral. They've been building a case." Grace's voice was calm, factual. "Emotional neglect, cultural erasure, fraud." Eleanor's face went pale. "Fraud?" Grace nodded toward the birth certificate still lying on the floor. "Forging a legal document, changing a child's name without the mother's consent while she was dying." She paused. "That's a crime, Mrs. Harris." William felt the room tilt. "They want custody," Grace said quietly. "Joint custody at minimum. They want Adrian to know his mother's family, to spend time in Nigeria, to learn Yoruba." She looked directly at William. "To know his real name." William's arms tightened around Adrian instinctively. "They can't take him." "They're not trying to take him," Grace said. "They're trying to save him from becoming what you are." The words cut deeper than anything else she'd said. Eleanor walked over and gently lifted Adrian from William's arms. The baby went to her without resistance, resting his head against her shoulder. She looked at her son, and William saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Disappointment. "You need to fix this," Eleanor said softly. "How?" William's voice cracked. "How do I fix this?" "I don't know." Eleanor kissed Adrian's head. "But you better figure it out before they get here. Because if you fight them, William, if you try to keep that family away from this child, you'll lose, and you'll deserve it." She walked toward the door, then stopped. "Grace, you'll stay in the main house tonight, the guest room upstairs." Eleanor didn't wait for an answer. "And William? You're going to sit down with Rebecca's family when they arrive. You're going to listen, and you're going to take whatever they have to say." Then she left, taking Adrian with her. Grace and William stood alone in the nursery. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Grace picked up her bag. I should get settled. Grace, she stopped. Did she? William's voice was barely a whisper. Did Rebecca hate me? Grace turned, and for the first time, her expression softened just slightly. No, she said. She loved you. That's what made it so hard. Then she walked out, closing the door behind her. William sank to the floor, his back against the wall, and for the first time in 5 months, he let himself feel everything he'd been burying, the grief, the shame, the crushing weight of what he'd done. Downstairs, the doorbell rang. Voices echoed through the house, unfamiliar voices, speaking in a language William had spent years pretending he didn't understand. Rebecca's family had arrived. William heard them before he saw them, voices in the entryway, soft, speaking Yoruba. He stood at the top of the stairs, frozen. Eleanor's voice joined theirs, calm, apologetic. Please come in. I'm so sorry for your loss. William forced himself down the steps. 3 people stood in his foyer. An older woman in a deep purple dress, a head wrap framing her face. Rebecca's eyes stared back at him. Beside her, 2 men, one in glasses and a suit, the other younger, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. The woman looked at William, and the world stopped. Mr. Harris, she said quietly. Her accent was thick. I am Folake Oladipo, Rebecca's mother. William couldn't breathe. These are my sons, Adebayo and Chidi. The younger one, Chidi, didn't move, just stared at William with pure hatred. Where is my grandson? Folake asked. Eleanor stepped forward. He's upstairs, sleeping. I can let him rest. Folake's voice was gentle but firm. We need to speak with Mr. Harris first. They moved into the sitting room. William felt like his legs would give out. Folake sat, her back straight, her hands folded. Her sons stood behind her like sentries. 5 months, she said softly. My daughter has been dead for 5 months, and you never called. William's mouth went dry. I didn't know how to. You didn't want to, Chidi snapped. You wanted to keep pretending she had no family. Chidi. Folake's tone was firm. He went silent. She looked back at William. My daughter called me the night before she went into labor. She was terrified. She said if something happened to her, you would erase everything. William's chest tightened. I told her she was wrong, Folake continued, her voice cracking slightly. I told her you loved her. She paused. She said, Mama, he loves me, but he's ashamed of me, and shame is stronger than love. The words hit like a fist. Adebayo leaned forward. We're not here to fight, Mr. Harris, but we need to know something. He paused. Can you love a child who looks like us, who carries our blood? William stared at him, tears burning his eyes. I don't know, he whispered. Folake reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph. She slid it across the table. William's hand shook as he picked it up. Rebecca. In full Nigerian bridal attire, vibrant coral and gold, intricate beading, smiling wide, surrounded by family, beautiful, radiant, alive. That is who you erased, Folake said quietly. William couldn't look away from the photo. Upstairs, Adrian started crying. Folake stood immediately. May I see him? Eleanor nodded, and before William could stop her, Rebecca's mother walked toward the stairs. Chidi leaned forward, his voice low and deadly. You have 24 hours to decide, Mr. Harris. Either you make this right publicly, or we take you to court. What do you want? William whispered. Adebayo's voice was calm but cold. His real name, restored. Our family and his life, and the truth told. William looked up. And if I say no? Chidi's jaw tightened. Then we'll make sure the world knows exactly what kind of man you are. Upstairs, the crying suddenly stopped. Folake's voice drifted down, soft, singing, in Yoruba. And then, cutting through the silence, Adrian laughed. William's heart stopped. Grace appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale. Mr. Harris, she said quietly, there's something else you need to know. William's legs moved before his mind caught up. He climbed the stairs, his heart hammering in his chest. Grace stepped aside as he reached the top. Through the open nursery door, he saw her. Folek sat in the rocking chair, holding Adrian. The baby was nestled against her chest, calm, peaceful, his tiny hand gripping her finger. She was singing, softly, the same melody Grace had sung. And Adrian, his son who never smiled, who barely made eye contact with anyone, was staring up at her face like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. William's throat closed. Folek looked up and saw him standing in the doorway. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't stop singing. When the lullaby ended, she spoke. Still in Yoruba, her voice gentle. Adrian cooed, actually responded to the sound. William felt something crack inside his chest. "He knows," Grace whispered beside him. "Babies remember sounds from the womb. Rebecca must have sung to him every day while she was pregnant." William's vision blurred. Folek pressed her lips to Adrian's forehead, tears sliding down her cheeks. Then she spoke in English, her voice breaking. "My daughter sang this to you when you were inside her every night. She wanted you to know her voice." She looked up at William. "Even if she never got to hold you." William gripped the doorframe to steady himself. Eleanor appeared behind him, her hand gently touching his shoulder. But William couldn't move, couldn't speak. Folek stood slowly, still holding Adrian. She walked toward William, and for a moment he thought she was going to hand him the baby. But she didn't. Instead, she looked him in the eye. "My daughter died believing you would protect him," she said quietly. "But you didn't protect him. You tried to make him invisible, just like you made her." The words cut deeper than anything William had ever felt. "Mrs. Oladipo, do you know what preeclampsia is, Mr. Harris?" William blinked, confused by the sudden shift. "It's a pregnancy complication," she continued, her voice steady now. "Caused by stress, by fear, by a body that feels unsafe." William's blood went cold. "The doctors told me Rebecca's condition worsened because of emotional distress." Folek's grip on Adrian tightened slightly. She was carrying the weight of hiding who she was, of cutting off her family, of living in fear that you would leave her if she asked for too much. William felt his knees buckle. "So when you ask yourself why my daughter is dead," Folek said, her voice like steel now, "remember this: she died trying to be small enough for you to love." The room spun. Eleanor gasped behind him, and downstairs the doorbell rang. Grace pulled out her phone, glanced at the screen, then looked at William. "That's the lawyer," she said quietly. "Rebecca's family brought legal documents. They want you to sign them tonight." William looked at Folake, still holding his son. "What documents?" Adebayo appeared at the top of the stairs, a folder in his hand. "Custody agreement," he said simply. "Joint legal custody. Adrian spends summers in Lagos, mandatory cultural education, and his name, legally restored to Adrian Oluwaseun Harris." He held out the folder. "You have 1 hour to decide." William stared at the papers. 1 hour to choose between control and truth, between the life he'd built on lies and the son he barely knew. Folek turned back toward the nursery, still holding Adrian. "And Mr. Harris," she said without looking back, "if you say no, we will take this to court, and we will win." The nursery door closed softly behind her, and William stood in the hallway, staring at the folder in Adebayo's hands. Downstairs, voices echoed. The lawyer had entered the house. The clock was ticking. William sat alone in his office, the folder unopened on his desk. 1 hour. The house was silent now. Too silent. He could hear voices downstairs, Rebecca's family speaking with the lawyer, Eleanor's quiet responses, Grace moving through the hallway. But up here, it was just him and the weight of everything he'd done. He opened his desk drawer. Inside was a small box he hadn't touched in months, Rebecca's wedding ring, her journal, a USB drive labeled "For Adrian." His hands shook as he picked up the journal. He'd read it once, the night she died, then locked it away because the words were too painful. But now, he opened it again. The pages were filled with her handwriting, neat, careful, heartbreaking. Month 3. I wonder if our baby will have my mother's laugh. William says he wants him to look like me, but I don't think he means all of me, just the parts he can show people. William's throat tightened. Month 5. I tried to leave today, packed a bag, called Mama, but William cried. He begged, he promised things would change, and I believed him because I wanted to, because I'm tired of being angry, because love shouldn't feel this lonely. His chest ached. Month 7. I asked him again about telling his father. He said, soon. He always says soon. I'm starting to realize soon means never. William's vision blurred. Month 8. The doctors say I'm high risk. They keep using words like complications and stress. They asked if I have support at home. I lied. I said yes. But the truth is, I've never felt more alone. I'm carrying a child in a house that doesn't want me. And I'm scared. Not of dying, but of him growing up the way I lived. Hidden, erased, ashamed. William closed the journal, his hands trembling. She knew. She'd known all along what he was doing to her, and she'd stayed anyway. A soft knock broke the silence. Eleanor stepped inside, her face drawn and tired. They're waiting, she said quietly. William didn't move. Eleanor sat down across from him. What are you going to do? I don't know. Yes, you do. Her voice was firm but not unkind. You've always known. You're just afraid of what it'll cost you. William looked up at her. What if I lose everything? You already did, Eleanor said. The moment Rebecca died and you decided to keep lying. The words settled over him like ash. She loved you, William. Despite everything, she loved you. Eleanor's voice cracked. But love isn't enough when the person you love makes you disappear. William's head dropped into his hands. I didn't mean to. I know. Eleanor reached across the desk and touched his hand. But intent doesn't erase harm, and that baby upstairs deserves better than your fear. Footsteps approached. Adebayo appeared in the doorway. Time's up, Mr. Harris, he said. What's your answer? William stood slowly, his legs unsteady. He looked at the folder, at the journal, at his mother's face. Then he picked up the papers. I need to see him first, William said quietly. I need to see my son. Adebayo stepped aside. William walked down the hall toward the nursery. His heart was pounding so hard he could barely breathe. He opened the door. Folak sat in the rocking chair, still holding Adrian. The baby was asleep now, his small face peaceful against her chest. She looked up at William, and for the first time, he didn't see anger in her eyes. He saw grief. He looks like her, William whispered. He is her, Folak said softly. Every part of him. William took a step closer. I'm sorry for everything, for what I did to Rebecca, for what I've done to him. Folak studied him for a long moment. Sorry is a beginning, she said, but it's not enough. She stood and walked toward him. Then, slowly, she placed Adrian in his arms. William held his son, really held him, for the first time in weeks. And Adrian, this tiny child who'd rejected him for so long, didn't pull away. He just breathed, small, steady breaths. His name is Oluwaseun, Folak said. It means God has done this. Rebecca chose it because she believed this child was a gift, even when everything else was falling apart. William's tears fell onto Adrian's blanket. I'll sign the papers, he whispered. Folak nodded. But then she said something that made William's blood run cold. There's one more thing you need to know before you do. William looked at Folak, still holding Adrian. What do you mean? Folak walked to the window, her back to him. Rebecca didn't just record one video. William's stomach dropped. There were 3, she continued quietly. 1 for you, 1 for Adrian, and 1 for me. She turned around, her eyes filled with something William couldn't name. In mine. She told me something she never told you. Folak's voice trembled. She said if she died, you would try to keep us away, that you would fight to maintain control, that your pride would be stronger than your love. William felt his knees weaken. But she also said something else. Folak stepped closer. She said, "Mama, if William ever changes, if he ever truly sees what he's done, forgive him, because God already has." The words pierced through William like light through darkness. "I don't deserve that," he whispered. "No," Folak agreed, "you don't. But my daughter believed in grace. She believed people could change." Her voice softened. "I'm here because of that belief, not because I think you've earned it." William looked down at Adrian, sleeping peacefully in his arms. "What do I do?" His voice broke. "How do I fix this?" "You start by telling the truth," Folake said. "All of it. To your father, to your business partners, to the world." William's chest tightened. "My father will—" "I don't care what your father will do." Folak's tone hardened. "My daughter lost everything to protect your comfort. Now you have to choose your father's approval or your son's soul." The room fell silent. Downstairs, voices rose slightly. The lawyer was speaking without a bio. Eleanor appeared in the doorway. "They're ready for you." William looked at his mother, then at Folake, then down at Adrian. The baby stirred, his small hand reaching up, touching William's face. And for the first time in 5 months, Adrian didn't pull away. He just held on. William's tears fell freely now. "I'll sign," he said, "but I need to do something first." Folake raised an eyebrow. "What?" William walked to the dresser and pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking as he opened his contacts. He found his father's name, stared at it, then pressed call. It rang once, twice. "William," his father's voice was sharp, businesslike, "I've been trying to reach you. We need to talk about the board meeting next week." "Dad," William interrupted, his voice steady despite the trembling in his body. "I need to tell you something. About Rebecca." Silence on the other end. "She wasn't just British. She was Nigerian, Yoruba. I hid it from you, from everyone." William's voice didn't waver now. "I made her hide who she was because I was afraid of what you'd think, what you'd do." The silence stretched longer. "And tomorrow," William continued, "I'm holding a press conference. I'm telling the truth. About her, about me, about everything I did." His father's voice came back cold. "You do that and I pull every investment. You'll lose the company." William looked at Adrian, then at Folake. "Then I lose it," he said quietly. And he hung up. The room was dead silent. Eleanor's hand covered her mouth. Folake stared at him, her expression unreadable. Grace appeared at the door, her eyes wide. "The lawyer wants to know if you're ready to sign," she said softly. William nodded. "I am." But as he moved toward the door, Folake's voice stopped him. "Mr. Harris, there's something else." William turned. Folake pulled a small envelope from her bag. "Rebecca asked me to give this to Adrian on his first birthday. But I think you need to see it now." She handed it to William, on the front in Rebecca's handwriting. "For my son, if his father finally becomes brave." William's hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a single photo. Rebecca, 8 months pregnant, standing in front of a mirror, her hand on her belly, tears streaming down her face, and on the back, written in her handwriting, "Tell him I loved his father, tell him I forgave him, and tell him that love, real love, is braver than shame. I hope his father learns that before it's too late." William collapsed into the chair, clutching the photo to his chest, and somewhere deep inside him, something broke open, not with pain, but with light. Downstairs, the lawyer called up. "Mr. Harris, we need your signature." William stood, wiping his face. He looked at Folake, at Eleanor, at Grace. "I'm ready." But as they walked toward the stairs, Adrian, still in Eleanor's arms now, reached out, toward William, and spoke his first word. "Dada." The word was soft, unclear, but unmistakable. Adrian reached toward William, his small hand opening and closing. William's breath caught in his chest. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she gently placed Adrian in his father's arms, and this time Adrian didn't fuss, didn't pull away. He just rested his head against William's chest and sighed, like he'd finally found something he'd been searching for. Folake watched from the doorway, her hand over her heart. "He forgives faster than we do," she said softly. 3 days later, William stood in front of a room full of reporters. His hands were shaking. His father hadn't spoken to him since the phone call. 2 board members had already resigned, but Eleanor sat in the front row, Grace beside her, and in the second row, Folake, Adebayo, and Chidi, holding Adrian. William looked down at the paper in his hands, the statement he'd written and rewritten a dozen times. Then he folded it and set it aside. "My name is William Harris," he began, his voice unsteady, "and I need to tell you about my wife." The room went silent. Rebecca Oladipo Harris was Nigerian, Yoruba. She was brilliant, kind, and stronger than I ever gave her credit for. His voice cracked. And for 3 years, I made her hide who she was. I was ashamed, not of her, but of what people would think, what my father would think. He paused, swallowing hard. 5 months ago, Rebecca died giving birth to our son, and in the days after, I erased every trace of her culture from our home. I even changed our son's name, without her consent, because I was still too afraid to let the world see the truth. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled notes. Our son's name is Adrian Oluwaseun Harris. Oluwaseun means God has done this. It's the name Rebecca chose, the name I tried to steal from him. William looked directly at the camera. I'm telling you this because my son deserves to know his mother, all of her, and because hiding who you love is the same as hiding love itself. His voice broke completely now. Rebecca believed people could change. She believed in grace, even when I didn't deserve it. Tears streamed down his face. I'm standing here today because a woman I hurt gave me a second chance I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn. The room was dead silent. William looked at Folake. She nodded, her eyes wet. I've signed joint custody with Rebecca's family. Adrian will grow up knowing both his American and Nigerian heritage. He'll speak English and Yoruba. He'll know his grandmother, his uncles, his culture. William's voice steadied. And I'll spend every day making sure he knows his mother's voice, not through me, but through the people who loved her first. 6 months later. William stood in the backyard, watching Adrian take his first wobbly steps across the grass. Eleanor clapped, Grace cheered, and on the video call propped on the patio table, Folake's face filled the screen, tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched her grandson walk for the first time. "Oluwaseun!" she called out in Yoruba. "You're doing it!" Adrian laughed. That pure, joyful sound William had heard only once before, 6 months ago in the nursery. But now it came freely, often. William had lost his father's money, lost 2 business partners, but he'd gained something far more valuable. He'd gained his son. Adrian stumbled and fell into William's arms. William caught him, lifting him up, kissing his forehead. "I've got you," William whispered. And Adrian, 11 months old now, babbling in both English and Yoruba, patted his father's face and smiled. Grace walked over, holding her phone. The foundation's first scholarship just went through. 5 Nigerian students, full rides to American universities. The Rebecca Oluwaseun Harris Foundation, launched 3 months ago with everything William had left after his father pulled out. William looked at the sky, clear, blue, endless. "She'd be proud of you," Eleanor said softly beside him. "I hope so," William whispered. On the screen, Folake spoke in Yoruba, then English. "She is proud, and so am I." William felt something shift in his chest. Not grief this time. Peace. Because he'd finally learned what Rebecca had tried to teach him all along, that love isn't about making someone small enough to fit into your world. It's about making your world big enough to hold all of who they are. Adrian reached for the phone screen, babbling at his grandmother, and Folake sang, the same lullaby Rebecca had sung while pregnant. Adrian's eyes lit up. He clapped his hands. And William realized this was what healing looked like. Not perfect, not painless, but real. "Thank you," William said to Grace, to Eleanor, to Folake on the screen. "Don't thank us," Folake said gently. Thank God. He's the one who wouldn't let my grandson disappear." William nodded, holding Adrian close, because she was right. God had used a maid, a mother, and a dying woman's promise to save a child from being erased, and in the process, he'd saved a father too.